You ever tried to explain a computer issue to somebody over the phone and realize just how much gets lost in translation? Or just how difficult it is to try to explain exactly what's going on? Or have you ever been on the other side of things, trying to explain something so simple to somebody over the phone, but they just can't seem to figure out what you're talking about? You end up lost for words, trying to explain, what an audio port is, or what an input jack is, or even trying to explain something like what a scroll wheel is. And the person you're talking to just needs, direction at every step of the way. And you realize that it's something that you could solve in, 10 or 15 seconds if you could just control their computer directly for just a moment. Sometimes you might be on the phone with tech support and they're trying to explain something to you, and they just end up going way over your head. And what they're talking about makes no sense. It just gets way too complicated. And, you consider just hanging up on them and taking it into the shop. So what this video is, it's a brief overview of remote access tools, which is also abbreviated RATs. We're going to cover them from a practical standpoint, and we're going to go briefly over the history of them and the protocols that underlie remote access technology. Finally, we'll address modern tools, the complexity of cross-platform usage, controlling a desktop with an iPhone, or conversely controlling an iPhone with a desktop. We'll also go over practical solutions and what type of programs you can use with your clients, or what type of programs that you can use to help people that with computer problems. And as an end user, this will also show you what to install if you'd like somebody else to take control of your computer to help you out with an issue. So remote access is the most common tool used by technicians. It's typically the first line of defense before doing an in-person on-site visit, is that you'll contact the person and you'll attempt to troubleshoot the issue through the phone. And after you go through the basic things of, turning it off and turning it back on again, and, read me the error message. Once you go past that point, instead of having them install software or do command line or anything like that, you just have them set up remote access, and then you do the rest for them. So remote access has several advantages, all of which just relate to, you not having to be on site. One is that there's no travel time, there's no lead time, and so there's a lower cost. You can do it from home, and they can do it from home. They don't have to come to you. Another advantage is that if it's a problem that you don't know how to fix, or that you're not qualified to fix, or that you don't speak the same language as the client, you can always hand off the job to somebody who's more suitable. Of course, all of these advantages are just an expansion of the fact that you don't have to travel to see the client. The main disadvantages of it is that there is some complexity in setting it up if you're dealing with somebody who's either completely computer illiterate, or you're dealing with a computer that has a problem that prevents remote access from being set up, like not having internet or a keyboard, maybe malware with the operating system that is preventing remote access or blocking ports. That's another thing that remote access can't fix. You can't use remote access to fix remote access. So historically, there are two main protocols used by machines when you're trying to use remote access. You've got UDP, which is User Datagram Protocol, and TCP, which is Transmission Control Protocol, I remembered. So the main difference between TCP and UDP, I'll start with TCP. TCP has a lot of different things like real-time streaming, send and synchronize, and acknowledge, which is basically the two computers will be like, are you ready for a data packet? And then the other computer will be like, yes. And the other computer will tell it, oh, it's going to be this big. It's going to be, 5 megabytes. And the other computer will be like, oh, send it. And then they'll confirm it. They'll confirm the size, and they'll go back and forth, but they'll do all these steps in between to make sure that no data is lost and everything sent by computer one is heard by computer two, and back and forth. So yeah, TCP is very controlled, and it's very efficient. And what it is it's really good for networks where you've reached capacity. And if you were to use this other protocol called UDP, it would be too congested. So UDP, why it causes congestion is it's referred to by most textbooks and on Wikipedia as a fire hose of information. If TCP were two people whispering or writing letters to each other, UDP would be two people from across the room just yelling. And they don't stop for the other person. They just yell. And then they do one really quick check at the end to make sure that they heard everything. And then they're good. So this is, ironically, they work at about the same speed for data transmission. It's just that one of them is a lot rougher on Ethernet cords. And by rougher, I mean that, if you have a bunch of computers talking using TCP and the same number of computers talking UDP, with TCP, you can have more computers on the same line. So, you kind of know those two basic things. It's important to learn the protocols because you build on them. They're going to show up again, not when we're talking about remote access, but we're talking about file transfers, we're talking about web hosting, we're talking about video streaming. These protocols are going to show up again and again and again. So remote access was first done by Stanford University in 1969. It was done on MS-DOS, and it was just done on kind of a conceptual level. It wasn't used on like a service call until 1987, which is when remote access was commonly used on systems to diagnose and solve problems. So it was finally used on service calls. These service calls were done using MS-DOS. That's what was popular at the time. And the code that they were using for these remote access service calls would eventually be standardized as the protocol known as Telnet. Telnet was in use until the early 90s. And the reason why Telnet worked during that time period was that the computer networks were a lot smaller. It was kind of a small town feel where everybody knew everybody. It was a couple of government research offices, universities, things like that. It wasn't where everybody had a computer. If you were able to remotely access another computer, you basically were rich or a large institution. And so they didn't have the problems that they have today with computer crime and malicious activity. So Telnet had a lot of problems with its security because they didn't need it. There would be ways to set up Telnet so that you did have a secure connection, and there were ways to set up Telnet to where you didn't have a secure connection. And then there was actually a really popular movie called War Games that came out in the 1980s about a high school student that has good computer skills, and he's able to, change his grades at school. So he breaks into the computers at school and is able to change his grades. He's able to break into a military computer that has an AI on it that's in charge of the nuclear arsenal. And he starts messing with it, not realizing what it is. And of course, that'd be completely unbelievable today for just like an American high school student. And it's funny because those vulnerabilities in that movie, you can be pretty certain they were Telnet vulnerabilities. And that's how widespread its problems were. Hacking a computer was basically as simple as connecting to it. Once Telnet got dropped, or what replaced Telnet was SSH. SSH stands for Secure Shell. A shell is when you go into a computer that is not yours and you open a command line. That's basically what a shell is. And it's called Secure Shell because you're not allowed to run it in a way that it is insecure. If you are running SSH, you are running a cryptographically secure program. And so SSH actually, it's not open source. I thought it was. I would have guessed it was because of how widespread it is, but it's actually not. It's owned by or created by some Scandinavian guy. So a little bit more about SSH is that it's basically fully encrypted. There are a few things like the initial handshake that isn't. And because of that, it's not vulnerable to things like a man-in-the-middle attack and fingerprinting passwords. And without going too deep into that, basically a man-in-the-middle attack is where you listen to two computers talking for long enough that you're able to impersonate one of the computers in the conversation and step in as that computer to start requesting information or sending information to the computer. And so that's what man-in-the-middle, basically you replace one of the parties. So SSH is on all computers now by default. It's on Mac, it's on Linux, and it's on Windows. Ironically, even though Windows only got SSH installed by default as far as Windows 10. Prior to that, they didn't have it, which was kind of ironic because they were the pioneers of remote access, and now they're kind of a little bit behind. And of course, the reason for that is they had their own proprietary protocol called PuTTY that they were pushing. That is, for Windows, it's an MS product. So, they're always going to push their own product first, especially when the function's basically identical. Have you ever run into problems using SSH, for commercial use or for anything that's not that? If you want to use SSH but you don't want it to be proprietary, There's OpenSSH, which I think is more popular for certain commercial applications and web hosting. It's the same thing as SSH, but without the proprietary limitations. Okay, so this is the practical part of the video. So we can come back to the practical part now that we've gone over all the old protocols and the academic kind of historical stuff. So the most challenging step for setting up remote access or for doing a remote access call is convincing your client how to set up remote access on the phone. Once you're able to do that, you're basically smooth sailing because you don't have to use a person who doesn't know how to use a computer to set it up. So it's really critical that this is as simple as possible for the end user. And for that reason, I recommend Chrome Remote Desktop because it's already on 65% of machines, and it's probably one of the easiest programs to install is Chrome, and then you just set up an extension and it's ready. It was looking into the other protocols because that's what this video was originally going to be about. And it involved a lot of pulling your IP address and then inputting into the other computer and setting up one computer as a host and, going into the firewall and opening up ports. And yeah, it's just, it wouldn't have been as interesting, and I don't think it would have been as practical. Another thing I really liked about it is it's cross-compatible, so you can connect anything that can run Chrome can connect to anything else that runs Chrome. Almost every other protocol is going to either be a lengthy setup, or it's going to be only for Windows to Windows or Linux to Linux or Mac to Mac. And so this one is kind of cool because you can use your cell phone to connect to a desktop. You can use your desktop to connect to a cell phone or a tablet, and that can be pretty neat if you are driving and you pull over and you can use your tablet to enter into command line, if somebody desperately needs you to do a remote service call right then and there. So I'd say one of the most challenging things with getting remote access set up is that when you set it up, there's going to be a bunch of warnings on the client's computer, basically saying, do you know this person? Do you trust this person? Do you know what you're doing? You're basically allowing somebody to use your computer. And I mean, that can be tough for some people. I know it's tough for me because I was doing a job for a family friend that's a lawyer. And so they had a bunch of really sensitive data. They had access to business accounts with lots of money in them. And it was all done on this old desktop computer. And I was having a problem with their email server, which they also critically need for work. And I finally was like, well, we gotta call Microsoft because I'm not that familiar with how to interface GoDaddy and Office 365. As we were doing an integration. And so I called Microsoft and they're just like, oh yeah, we're going to remotely access your computer. And it's like, so I called Microsoft and they were like, okay, yeah, it sounds good. They had us turn it off and on again, of course. And then they said, okay, well, we're going to set up a remote access via like Team Viewer or some Microsoft proprietary thing. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, oh man, I hope this is really Microsoft. I mean, I had called them, so I knew it was, but I'm always hesitant that, if somebody's going to connect, they're going to use the remote access, and while they're doing it, they're going to leave something behind that allows them to get access again, which is possible, So I would say that if you ever, or just a small piece of advice, if you ever let somebody remote access into your machine and you can't see what they're doing, kill the connection. Unplug the Ethernet if you're not able to see exactly what they're doing. So if you let somebody connect to your machine remotely and you're a client, if you're ever able to not see what they're doing, I would disconnect the machine. Personally, sometimes people have ulterior motives. And, one of the things that I noticed when I was dealing with Microsoft is they always let you see what they were doing, and they were intentionally slow about what they were doing, so that things weren't happening so fast you couldn't understand. So probably that's what kind of makes this challenging is as you're telling your client to set up remote access, they're going to get a few warnings. One will be probably from the operating system, one will be from Google, and then you'll have a final warning saying your screen is about to be shared, over the internet. Setting this up allows a third party to control your machine and make changes. And of course, when you set up admin access on remote access, it'll say, hey, this person has access to everything on your computer. They have full control. And that can be a little bit worrisome, especially with people who are paranoid and don't actually know how to use computers. But if you can get over that with them, this is great. So yeah, I think a big part of that is just maintaining professionality as a technician. And, some people, if they don't let you do it, that's fine. That's their problem at the end of the day. So a lot of the times when you're on a job site, you're not going to have the leeway to just decide what remote access protocol you're going to use. A lot of the times these enterprise sites, they're going to have Cisco or TeamViewer or a Microsoft proprietary product, and that's fine. You'll just use those. But when you have the ability to make decisions for yourself on what type of program you're going to use, I'd recommend Chrome Remote Desktop just because it's the fastest and it's going to work on everything that you're going to try to get it to work on. And I haven't really ran into any limitations with it yet. One of the key shortcomings of this program is that Google collects some marketing data on you. And that means that it is not appropriate for anything with healthcare and HIPAA, anything military, and certain large businesses where they're concerned about corporate espionage. They will not use a Google product. But if you are working for a company like that, the odds are that you are not even going to have a choice in what program you use, and in that case, just follow the documentation. So that just about covers it. I do have some videos that I set up. I'm gonna play them on my computer, and you open Chrome, and then you just type into the URL bar Chrome Remote Desktop, and you click the first link that shows up. You'll get a thing that says either set up remote access on this computer or connect to another computer. So I've already set up on the other computer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to connect to it. And so you'll have two computers. One will be the computer in need of service, the technician computer, and the client computer. So the client needs service and the technician does the service there. That makes sense. So the basic thing that you're going to do is you're going to call the client and you're going to say, hey, do you have Chrome installed? And if they say yes, you're good. You go on to the next step, or you say, okay, can you please install Chrome and start it? Once they start Chrome, you say go to the URL bar. It's at the top, type in Chrome Remote Desktop, and then click on the first link. Once they do that, they click on the first link, and it'll have two options. One option will be connect to another computer or allow a computer to connect to this computer. It'll say connect to another computer, or it will say share this screen. And so you'll go to share this screen, and there'll be a blue button. You go to share this screen, and there will be a blue button that says share this code. You click that, and it'll probably give you a bunch of warnings. On this sample video, I did it on Mac. So yeah, you'll get a pop-up that says you need to grant permission by going to accessibility and granting remote hosting ability. And so yeah, depending on what operating system you'll use, it'll have different security checks. I know on Mac, it asks me to click on this. It asks me to click on something to change something in the settings to allow it. Hopefully if you just ask your client, hey, can you read what showed up and what the options are to click, you'll be able to get through it with them. I think the real key is to go slow. I know that as like a technician, we always are trying to go fast because that's what we consider good service, because we know these people are paying hourly. And so we're trying to keep their bill as low as possible. But a lot of the times when you're dealing with this initial stuff, it's really important that you don't overwhelm them. And so having them read what the box says can help them understand it a little bit better. Even if you already know what it's going to say, I would say to just let them finish reading. I wouldn't cut them off or anything like that. So at the end of it, once you go through the prompts, you'll eventually get a 12-digit code. You have them read off that code, and once you type it into your computer, you're in. You'll be able to connect as them. You'll be able to open programs. You'll be able to go into command line. You basically have full connective ability. And so it can be a little trippy. You can practice this at home if you have two computers just to know what it looks like, because it can be a little confusing, especially when you have different operating systems, because you'll have in the middle of it, you'll have one operating system, and then if you zoom out, you'll have another operating system inside of it. So it can be a little overwhelming at first. And it's also weird to be like using an Apple interface inside a Windows interface. It's very, very strange. It's a strange feeling. So yeah, just some etiquette for when you are connecting to a client's machine. I recommend doing things slowly, and you can even be really polite and say, okay, I've connected. I'm going to move the mouse now. You let me know if you want me to stop, just because it can be difficult for people to give up control. It's kind of like driving and letting somebody else take the wheel. It's just, it can be a little challenging to give up control for people. I would, go slow, and I would not like dig around at all. What I've seen a lot of technicians do when they're doing stuff is instead of going to the start menu and going up and down to see where stuff is to then click on a program, they'll start it directly from the command line in case they have some stuff on their start menu that you don't want to see. I've seen people do that a lot too, especially if you're using it with like an end user rather than a business system. A lot of people have private stuff on their computers, so it's just, try to be mindful of that and be professional. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I hope you learned a little something about remote access. Feel free to smash that like button. This is James at TechDebt. Thanks for watching.